Good morning, everybody. Thank you for signing in to the Scaling Your Service Business webinar today. I'm Allie Stevens with the Florida SBDC at UNF. Just a little couple items of housekeeping. We are going to be muting everybody. So if you have any questions, please type them into the questions area on your side control panel or in the chat box, and we will address them at the end of the webinar. And also, you will be getting an evaluation at the end of this email to everybody who is attending today. So please be sure to fill out that eval because we live and die by feedback, and we do it to help improve our future events. So without further ado, I am going to hand this over to your presenter today, Linda Kolka.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Linda, and welcome to a wet, kind of rainy day here in Jacksonville. So what you're about to hear is about 25 minutes of a 3-hour workshop that I have conducted several times now. So I'm going to just hit the high points. I'm going to be talking as fast as I can to get as much content in here for you as possible. For those of you who don't know who I am, I've been a business consultant here with the Florida SBDC at UNF for 4 years. And my first 2 years here were working with a program called Scale Up, which took 50 businesses each year and attempted to scale them to the next level. So they were all what we call small and medium-sized enterprises that had been in business for a while and were ready to roll. That's where I found my interest in this concept of scaling. It's where I've done my research. And what you're about to see here is sort of a third iteration, if you will, specifically addressing the service businesses because so many businesses now are in the service sector. So the first thing I want to do is I want to, I popped up on the screen here the life cycle of a business with a really important number to keep in mind. So as you can see, life cycles of businesses are sort of like the life cycles of people. We are born, we get started, we grow, we mature, we decline, and then we move on to whatever it is we think happens next. The really important thing here to recognize is that 91% you see is how many businesses never come out of startup mode. So 91% of all small businesses never come out of startup mode and enter into that rapid growth curve. And it's the rapid growth curve that I want to talk to you about today. So scaling versus growing, what's the difference? It's really important for folks to understand this because sometimes I think there's a misunderstanding. So when we talk about growth, we typically presume that growth is linear. So for every incremental dollar, it requires an incremental unit of time, if you will, or some other resource. And all resources are limited. There's no unlimited bucket of time, money, what have you. Exponential growth is something a little bit different, and that's where we want to take you. That's really what scaling is all about. Scaling is being able to reduce the incremental cost to deliver each incremental dollar of revenue, if you follow that. So if it costs me $1 today to get $1 of revenue tomorrow, if I can scale this business, it will only cost me 10 cents today to get $1 of revenue tomorrow, or 5 cents a day to get $1 of revenue tomorrow. And the best example of this is in the electronics industry, and Jeff Bezos did brilliantly with books. So once the initial cost to set up a book is in his system, whether he sells 1 or 1 million, the incremental cost to deliver those is almost nothing, which is why his business grew as quickly as it did. Unlike what happens typically in a service business, where in order for me to get another unit of business, I've got to generate, I've got to get another person out there, I use more of my hours. That becomes problematic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some research that I've done. This research came from law firms, consulting firms, construction firms, engineering and software companies, and accounting firms. There was no retail involved in here because many retail operations are built on franchise models. And that's a little bit different than what we're going to talk about here. But I want you to know where the research came from. And it came from these industries simply because that's where I could find it. Some of you may be in a little bit of a different service business, but some of the fundamental principles will apply here. So a couple of key things that you need to take away is the fundamental differences between services and products. Okay, so let me go down this list for you, and it's kind of obvious, but these are fundamental differences that you really need to understand. Difference between services and products. The services are intangible, products are tangible. That simply means that you can't hold them. Okay, so you can't touch them. Typically with a service, what you do is you get to see or feel the result or the outcome, and sometimes that's just peace of mind. Think of the insurance industry. The insurance industry really is a service industry, and what people get is a peace of mind. Yeah, they get a piece of paper. That piece of paper is not the outcome of the transaction. The transaction is a peace of mind. So the documents an attorney creates, a tax return, those are the results of service provided. No bugs in your house is the result of a bug service provided. But you can't really hold on to those things. You can't touch those things. Okay? Versus two iPhones. If I got two iPhones and if I'm holding them both in one each in each hand, okay, they're both exactly the same. I know what I got when I walk out of the store. Okay? The second thing to keep in mind is that services are perishable and products typically are non-perishable or storable, and we're not talking about perishable goods or things like food. Okay? And this one is a little bit difficult for people to kind of understand. The key here is the word storable. Services cannot be stored. Okay? You can't. People who deliver them can be hanging around, but the actual services they provide is only available when it is being provided. Okay? The kind of take a look at the iPhone example. They can be on the shelf at the warehouse in the store for a long time. It doesn't cost you anything. If you've got service people hanging around and they're not providing the service, that's costing you money, and the time is perishing because you will never get those hours back to deliver any more service. Okay, so that's what I want you to sort of think about. The trick here is you can't actually take the service delivery off of the shelf. And if someone's not actually available to perform the service, there's nothing to take off the shelf to be able to respond rapidly to a request. So point number two. Point number three is that services are variable versus standardized. Two iPhones. I don't care how many people are sitting in a room. They're all that machine is going to always operate and look pretty much the same. Variableness in services is a direct result of the fact that most are typically delivered by people. There will always be variation in how the service is performed. Two attorneys, two accountants, two barbers will not deliver the service in the same way, though the outcome or the result may be the same. So think the attorney's document or the tax return or the haircut. Okay, all of those things are virtually customized. Almost everything is customized when you're delivering a service. And when you're standardizing products or services, that's not the case. So no two customers are the same. They don't have exactly the same needs, and that's what makes the variation such a kind of a critical component here. Okay, the last piece here to keep in mind is that services are inseparable from the person who is delivering them versus products which can be, and we usually are, independent. I don't need to know who in the factory made this iPhone that I'm holding right now. All I need to know is it is independent of who created it. When I have to deliver a service, who delivers it may in fact show some variation. So for example, the bug service person may essentially perform the same treatment on your house, but no two people have the same personality, so no two are going to interact with the customer in the same way. Same like with attorneys, accountants, barbers, stylists. Okay, and the really important point here is that the interaction is subjective on the part of the person receiving the service. So a poor interaction can affect a customer's perception of the quality of the service. So, think about that in terms of, let's go back to the iPhone thing. It doesn't matter who hands you the box. That even if the guy who handed you the box is a jerk, when you walk away and you're holding your phone, you're still feeling pretty good because even though, the guy was a jerk, it rarely affects how you feel about the phone. The only exception to that might be the service component if you need help with the phone. And then, kind of we're back into this. So those four things are critically important for you to understand is the fundamental differences between products and services. Moving on. So let's talk about each of these sort of and what you can do in an attempt to try to scale your business and kind of get on that exponential curve. The very first thing important to do is think about how you might be able to productize any of the services that you offer. Let me give you an example. Okay, product companies, it's real easy for them to scale because once they get everything sort of in some sort of a format, the machines can crank out as many as they want or they need. There's little standardization, if any. There's no customization, so all of the interaction is pretty much gone. All of that stuff only happened in the design phase. Let me give you some examples from what we did here at the SBDC. We actually took concepts that we have, services that we provide in terms of consulting, and we turn them into products. Exit stage left is on valuation and exit strategy, profit master. So you can see them on the screen here. Why is that important? Because what we can do is we can train anybody here in the office on any one of these products, if you will. And so now all of a sudden, rather than having one or two people who can deliver the product, we now have an entire fleet of consultants who can deliver different products. So what we did, and the takeaway here is the ability to be able to kind of productize also provides you an opportunity to expand, and we'll talk about that in just a couple of seconds here. So with these products, we can kind of expand our distribution channels as well. We can deliver the same kind of content we would have had to deliver here via Skype, Zoom, email courses, telephone, in person, in a webinar. Okay, the product is the same, the outcome is kind of different, and the result is different based on the client's business. But we turned it into a product, so to speak. So the key here is to try to create products from your services that you can simply take off the shelf. One example that I like to use all the time is for physical therapy. Clearly a product service, clearly a personal service product. You're actually working with one person, one-on-one. Okay. An example I gave to a PT guy that I was working with here was back school. Okay. Well, why not create a product called Back School? Okay, that basically teaches people how to move, behave, exercise, manage their bodies throughout the course of a day to keep themselves and keep their back healthy. Once you put that algorithm in place, that thing can be taken off the shelf. It can be delivered to more than one person at a time. It can be delivered via email, via a webinar, via a podcast. It allows you to provide the service to more people with the same number of people or even fewer people. So now once I have the product, I can put that in multiple forms and multiple formats. And I don't need to be 2 or 3 or 4 PTs. I can, in fact, be providing that content and information to a whole heck of a lot of people with only one physical therapist in my office. Okay. The key here is to keep remember that products can be standardized. So down in bullet point 2, what you want to think about is turning your skill and knowledge into videos, workbooks, programs, guides, finding distribution channels that expand your reach, and then kind of thinking about what you can do in terms of licensing, branding, private labeling, maybe doing some train-the-trainer credentialing. Key here, again, is to standardize. And when you do that, when you create those products, you also create processes, and processes automate offerings that are standardized. There's a process for making an iPhone, and nobody waffles from that process. Same sort of thing is what you want to do when you kind of get into, when you start creating products from your services. You want to make sure that you can automate as much as you can, because automation is really a game changer. Addressing the concept of perishable. So this has to do with people, and it's really important because you have to come figure out what's the level of staffing do I need to meet the demands of my market. So predicting the level of inventory required becomes critically important. So staffing here is really what we're kind of talking about. You must get really, really good and get a really full understanding of the business drivers of your industry. If you're an accounting firm, you know that your staffing needs are going to increase during tax season, for example. If you're a law firm, maybe there's times of year or target markets that help you with predictability. For example, maybe older clients need help with estate planning. What do the demographics look like in this or proposed market? Younger clients might need more help with traffic issues. What are those demographics in your market? And then how do I staff to be able to reach those folks? Okay, so what typically happens is that people are overworked during times of, kind of periods of time when the demand goes up, and underworked when the period of time, when the demand goes down. And what we're trying to do is level out that staffing. So the key here is to invest in the right people who can actually help you with that analysis. And you really have to have a good hiring, recruiting, and retention plan in place that supports the engagement. So your three key questions to ask yourself: who do I need to keep? Are there people who I may need to lay off, and who has the operational wisdom in my organization who can help me better understand how I keep my people sort of fresh so they don't perish? Because typically what happens if you have people hanging around too long, or if you're overworking them, eventually they get burned out, you lose engagement, and then that becomes problematic. And I will tell you that there is not a person who has come through our doors in the last year or so who hasn't told us that staffing is one of their biggest issue right now. And most of the businesses we deal with are service-based businesses. So understand that there's a whole lot more that obviously goes into place here, but some of the bullet points that you see can and maybe help you. Okay? So can you use joint ventures? Are there other arrangements that you may have with other companies to kind of help spread the risk of too much or too little? Okay? Think about that. And the other thing I would suggest is that you want to begin to think about how you look at the people that you have working for you. Try to kind of break through some of the stereotypes that you may have about young people, old people, disabled people. A lot of the right people in the right place can help you identify the right staffing level and help you recognize things that you may be unable to see on your own because you're too busy chasing the day-to-day operations of the business. Variable. Okay, so services are variable, and that's simply because they cannot be removed from or separated from the person who is delivering this. So the key here is, how do you standardize as much as possible to remove that variability, so no matter who is receiving your service, okay, it's pretty much consistent time after time after time. Okay? Because services are not manufactured to tolerance, like standard tolerance is the way products are, okay, your service delivery will always vary from one product to another. Okay? Again, let me go back to some of the examples. Two accountants, very different personalities and work habits, even if they're both completing 1040 tax returns. Okay? They'll have different communication styles, they'll have different work habits, they'll have different amounts of time they want to spend with people, different approaches with their clients, and that's fine if a customer works with the same person year over year. But what if, because of the workload, a client works with more than one person? They're working with multiple people at the same time. Okay? Will the people that they're working with have the same experience with that person? So am I consistent? If I work with Mary and Sally and Joe, will Mary and Sally and Joe all have the same experience with me? Or am I overworked and am I a little stressed out by the end of the day? So Joe kind of gets the short end of the stick, and I'm really friendly with Mary first thing in the morning because I'm fresh again. Okay. So the key here is you can never really, and you don't want to remove that variability, because that's what makes each of us unique, and that's what makes people people. But what you want to do is you can get close to removing the variability with systems and processes. Okay? So you don't remove the personality, but what you do is you ask people to follow consistent systems and processes. So like when PricewaterhouseCoopers opens a new location, what do? They literally open a box, and every process is in there. The outreach for new client process, the client intake process, the work process, timelines, forming, hiring, all of those processes are in the box. So PwC can go into any community once it's done the research and discovered that that's going to be an important community for them. Open a box and pop up a company. That's how they scale, because it didn't cost them a significant amount because they already had pieces in place. So your key is to try to process size as much as you can, so that you can put all of those into a box and they just pop up. And the real key here is that you have to make sure that for the people who are working with you, everyone, every time, all the time, accountable for following those processes. Okay? We don't want to take away individual creativity and talent when delivering the service. Okay? But what we want to do is standardize how the work, or how the process works, so the workflow can be managed and predicted, and anyone can follow that. Okay, anyone can follow that. So let's see if I can hit everything on the slide here. Every new employee, every existing employee follows the process, no exceptions. Um, and the last thing I want to say here is if you can narrow your focus, niche services often much easier to build efficiencies into and to build processes. The more you have to customize each and every time, the more complicated it gets. The more you have to reach outside into a different industry, the more you have to know about different industries. So the more you can narrow your focus, okay, you can build efficiencies that then position you in that niche as the go-to place for that particular service. Let's see if there's anything else I want to say about that. Narrow is really more quickly scalable than broad. So that's kind of critically important. Um, think about how much communication is involved each time you have to customize something. So every time something is customized, there's more communication, there's more manual processes. That slows things down, room for error, and more variability. Okay, so really, really, really want you to think about how you specialize. Examples, there are a couple of, I'm going to go stick with a law firm. There's a company called Harvest Law. All they do in California is provide regulatory and business legal services to California's cannabis industry. It doesn't get much more specific than that, right? They know everything. They're the go-to people if you're selling pot in California. Another company called Access Law, flat fee, 7 locations. Doesn't matter what you do, we're going to charge you a flat fee. They can open a box and open that in a whole lot of places. Home Sweet Legal Real Estate in St. Louis has done the same thing, where all they do is legal stuff for real estate folks. So I want you to think about how you might be able to narrow your focus a little bit, and then think about what the processes in that could look like. And you see some of them on the screen here. Sometimes folks ask me, well, what do you mean by processes? There's the document prep, email communication, data entry, billing intake, all those sorts of things. Anything, the back office stuff, the front office stuff, all requires some sort of a process. Even how people answer the phone. Okay? The more you can automate those, the more you have a game changer kind of position for yourself. So this last piece here has to do with the concept of inseparability, and that's that you cannot separate the service that you're delivering from the person who is actually delivering it. So to scale a service company, to grow quickly, expand locations or your geography, you must, even though it's not possible, but you must attempt to effectively clone yourself from those people who have demonstrated a superior ability to deliver that service. They have to be competent. So you have to understand exactly what it is you need with respect to education, credentials. You have to have minimum standards, minimum ability, and not vary from that at all. That will help you kind of get the best players in front of others. Okay, it also helps you reduce variability. So you've got a backside to that. The people that you bring on board or that you work with closely, regardless of whether they're employees, 1099 folks, or either joint venture partners, they have to be willing and able to follow your processes. And really, more importantly, you hope that they are constantly looking for ways to improve processes and automation. Right? And they really need to be an excellent fit for your culture, because otherwise what's going to end up happening is the culture that you're trying to create can maybe look like it's got sort of split personalities on occasion. This is really an incredible critical piece. Okay, like when an engineering firm opens another location, okay, when they open the box, right? So when PwC opens a box in another location, there are processes and systems in place, but there aren't any people in the place. Okay, there aren't any people in the box. Okay, so it's really, really important to kind of understand how you kind of create that quote unquote cloning process. You have to have benchmarks. You want to employ a very, very clear and consistent recruiting and hiring process. Think about this. If you move to a new location, okay, the recruiting and the hiring process should be in the box. That way, whoever is there can follow that process, and they know that if they're following the process and following the benchmarks that have been outlined for the ideal candidate, that the people who they hire are going to look as close as they can to the PwC type, if you will. As funny as it sounds, when I worked for Procter & Gamble, on my first day, I asked the HR guy who said, we're going to fly you to Cincinnati, we're going to put you in training, and he said that, there'll be a bus there to pick you and some other people up. And I said, how will I know who the other people are? And he said, I quote, just look for some other P&G type. and I am not kidding you. I got into the kind of the off the plane, kind of looking around, and I saw a few people, and I thought that's them. Those are the people because they kind of look like me. Okay, so they had that down to a science. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to build a consistent recruiting platform that's going to help you on kind of clone people. Okay, what are the processes you're going to use to identify, hire, or evaluate and hire people? What is the data and rubrics? What is the process you're going to use? Who's going to get the interview? What questions are you going to ask? What training or how are you going to train the hiring managers to follow the process? If 5 different people are asking 5 different questions, you don't know, you're not going to remove that variability, and you may not be kind of cloning the person that you want to be the front person and the face of your business. So we have some more stuff on that that kind of shows you how we created some benchmarks and some sort of grids, if you will, that kind of take as much of the subjective stuff out of it and try to turn it into a more objective process. So let me see. Let me kind of go right here. We already kind of showed this behaviors. There's the cloning process. I already talked about all that. So the key here, okay, since we're down to the last 5 minutes, I want to make sure I can answer any questions if anybody has any. The real key here is what you want to do is you want to make your services as much like products as possible. And I know there are some of you out there saying right now, I can't do that because I'm different. That's not true. Everybody can do that to some extent. So the key here is to kind of do some brainstorming. Here's what I'm going to suggest, and I'm going to give you a 30-day challenge. Okay? I want you to work with people that work with you, people that have worked with you, perhaps key customers that absolutely love you. Okay? I want you to brainstorm how to productize your service. How do you make something that you do tangible? How do you make it tangible? How do you provide the information so that it can be sort of taken off the shelf and anybody can make that happen? So how do you productize your service? How do you give your services shelf life? How can you make them non-perishable, which is how do you level out the demand, or how do you make sure that you can address the demand when it gets crazy? And part of that is by productizing the service, because once you do that, if you can't get to somebody, you can look at them and say, you know what, it's going to be 2 weeks before I can get a person out there, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you to a YouTube video that's going to give you 5 steps that you can take before we get there to how to make this all easy. And that way you sort of, kind of taken advantage of the time. You've given them something to do so they don't go look for somebody else. I want you to brainstorm how to standardize and reduce variability in what it is that you deliver. And clearly that comes most easily from niches. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. I don't know if you're a software developer, for example. Everybody's business is different, but the platform that you use and the approaches that you use can be consistent, and those can be part of the sort of reduced variability that people can become to expect and know, expect and appreciate from your business in particular. And then I want you to really think about how to best identify the people you need to provide consistency in the service delivery in your company. Okay, that's what's really critically important here. And those are the things what you're seeing on the screen right there, productizing, kind of giving a service a shelf life, if you will, so that the time is not wasted if you've got people standing around waiting for something to do, reducing variability and providing consistency in the service delivery regardless of who is delivering it. Those are the 4 key things that virtually every company that I saw when I did the research kind of figured out and got them on that exponential growth curve. So with that, I want to kind of take a break here. If you've got any questions, I am going to be available here for the next few minutes to answer those. I don't see any written yet. Oh, questions? Where did I take that? All right, if there are no questions, we are straight up 12 o'clock. And just as we promised, we would 30 minutes, we're in and out. So that's a lot of information. It's a ginormous data dump, but we have lots more information if there's something in there that you would like to discuss a little bit more. So with that, I am going to hand the mic back over to Allie so she can finish up with her part. And it was good talking with you. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Just a quick reminder, be on the lookout for the evaluation that will be sent to you. And also, if anybody is interested in receiving the presentation, we can certainly get that out to you attendees PDF form this afternoon. Going once, going twice on questions or chat, and seeing none, we will go ahead and sign off. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Bye.